Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 994. My opponent started off with e4, and I went for the Sicilian, the classical variation, starting with c5. Let's see, he went knight f3 there. Go d6, he goes d4, the open Sicilian, take. He takes, attack the pawn in the center, he defends. And I play knight c6. That's the characteristic move of the classical Sicilian. Lots of choices for white here. He played an interesting attacking line with bishop c4. You can see that's the second choice. And I think it's a good way to play. This is known as the Fischer-Sozin attack. See, I played e6. And the opening book in Lead Chess called it something else, but that's the way I learned it, at least. And then, what Bobby Fischer used to play here is he used to always retreat the bishop to b3 immediately, and then castle on the king side. That was the setup that he liked. The bishop is a bit loose, and he just didn't want to worry about it later or run into any tempo-gaining moves with d5. But there's actually nothing wrong with castling here. And I checked this out with a chess engine too. Normally bishop e7 is played here, or a6, but bishop d7 is also okay. And knight takes c6 is usually not considered the strongest move here. I mean, he can keep the pieces on, develop his bishop. He can put his king over here and push the f-pawn forward. Lots of different ideas for white in this position. So trading gives me an extra pawn in the center if I take with the pawn, or if I take with the bishop, it gives me a bishop on a good diagonal. So either of those seems to be kind of an improvement for black, although it seems after this white still has the usual kind of opening advantage, so I don't think it was a huge mistake. I just think it's maybe not the most accurate way to play. Yeah, so either way of taking is good. I like to take with the pawn, but maybe I should try out that bishop take sometime for a little something different. And then we're almost out of the opening book. He plays bishop g5. I think at that point we leave the book. He could play queen e2, which is an interesting idea, trying to push this pawn forward and break up my center here. And black typically responds with bishop to e7 there, so that this pawn is not pinned against the king, and the king can castle out of the center if things get nasty there. Anyway, he kept the pressure on the d-pawn and played bishop to g5, also an interesting way to play. We're just out of the book, but I don't think anyone really has made any mistakes here. So I kicked the bishop once. He kept the pin on with bishop h4, and then I decided to go bishop g5. It was perfectly playable, by the way, to go bishop e7, and this kind of move is kind of characteristic of the classical Sicilian. You let white take, and then you have to take back with the pawn, because otherwise your d-pawn is hanging here. And so you get this really solid pawn structure here, and the king can stay in the middle for a long time. The king can also castle if need be to bring the rook to the center. But it doesn't look like you're going to castle for safety, but it turns out that the center is pretty safe with this pawn structure. So that's a playable line. G5 turns out to be playable as well. It's also, and both these moves carry some risks. I mean, this is the kind of opening, the classical Sicilian, where you have to take some risks. And in both cases, we're disrupting the king side structure a little bit. It's not as harmonious as you might like. But anyway, he has to, for the moment, drop his bishop back. And then here I continue with d5. That seems to be the first actual mistake in the game. The chess engine much prefers e5 and thinks this game is about, even, maybe slight edge for white, but certainly playable for both sides. White might continue with the queen to d2, and then bishop e7. So the idea is to keep the bishop on this side. I was kind of hoping to get my bishop to this diagonal, but wrong diagonal. Get my bishop to the g7 square, have it work along this diagonal. That's kind of what I was thinking, but sometimes you have to go with what you can do, not what you want to do. So it seems like bishop e7, e5 and bishop e7 is a way to handle this situation. Then I could castle if the center comes under fire. I still have moves like queen to c7 and knight back to e8 to defend that, or even bringing a rook over if this bishop were out of the way. So things hold together okay after that. d5 is a slight mistake, although it's maybe not so easy to find the way to refute my play here. So he took, that was correct, I took. And then here's the key point, and here's where white can get an advantage. But only if he finds this move, knight to b5. But it's just a good move. You know, his bishop is hanging, but he has a big threat of knight coming into c7 with a check, and winning the rook in the corner, as well as pushing the king to a bad spot. I guess it just wins the exchange, so it might be 2 pieces for a rook, but he has some attack against my exposed king. Anyway, Chess Engine says I should play rook c8 here, attacking his bishop, and also defending against knight c7, so the bishop drops back, then trading it off, takes with check, and then it says I should play the king up. I guess it's a little too dangerous to block with the knight there. And so, yeah, white just has a good position. He has the bishop pair. My king is in an awkward spot, and you know, white's structure is perfect. So even though the material is even, there's a pretty big advantage to white here. Well, white has a material edge also if you count the bishop pair as material. Okay, so, but he didn't do that. He played the more natural move. Well, he moved his bishop just away from being attacked there. And now seems like it's playable for me again. Although white has an advantage here. Let's see, I went bishop g7, so I got the bishop on the diagonal I wanted to. He went to bishop e5, and I castled. And then now white's next move is actually a second mistake. And I start to have an advantage after that. So he should just, well, there's different things he could try here. He could drop the bishop back to d3, that was a suggestion. Or he could play a4, holding the bishop in position. Those are both reasonable moves. But he gave up the bishop pair, took my knight. He's trying to weaken things around my king side so his queen can hop in. But this just is not that great. Even though I didn't find the best move here, I still keep an advantage playing pretty simply. The best move is actually to take. I was thinking about something like this during the game, because after he takes back, his b pawn is hanging, so I can just grab that pawn. And I had noticed that. I just hate to leave, hate to have all my pieces deserting my king side while this h pawn is hanging, and his queen is near my king. But the queen doesn't have any support in this position, and the h pawn, there's just no follow-up after the queen takes the h pawn. My queen is still guarding the g pawn, and my bishop can hurry back to defend in any case if he takes a moment out to defend his rook, which Chess Engine recommends he should defend his rook. And I can just drop back. So that would lead to a big advantage. The move I played still leaves black with an advantage, so I keep an edge through this part of the game. Let's see, he played bishop back to d3 now, but his queen, you know, he wants to set up a battery, but his queen is going to have trouble getting on this diagonal because I control it with my pawns. Let's see, I played rook b8, not just attacking his loose pawn, but also I wanted to get my rook into the game. I was thinking of maybe doing a maneuver like this. Something similar happened. Let's see, he defended the pawn. I went bishop c6 here. I was also thinking maybe I should push this pawn forward to shut out his bishop on that diagonal, but I didn't want to give up the d pawn, so I'm preparing that. And he played f4, a nice aggressive move, although it's not enough to turn the game around. And still I can keep a pretty significant advantage here by ignoring this and just taking the knight. There's another thing I saw, but I didn't really like it. Let's see. But what it does is if he just takes back, it pulls this rook away from defense of the f-pawn, and then I can just take it. And even though I've weakened the pawn structure around my king side, he's just got the queen and the bishop, and he doesn't have any great way to coordinate them, and my queen can come out to the f6 square. So this is actually perfectly safe for me. A little bit hard for me to tell in a blitz game that was going to be okay. So anyway, I played the move I'd been thinking about. I played rook to b4. And now, if he plays knight e2, you know, black is still a little bit better here, but it gets tricky. let's see, the chess engine is recommending bishop b5. This is kind of a hard move to find because it's shutting in my rook. But let's see, he tries to, oh, yeah, chess engine is recommending b3 here, just defending the b pawn. And then, let's see, I take here, so that gives my knight an escape. And then I play queen to e7. And I just kind of hold this position. One point here is that if he ever takes, I can just take back with the bishop, and this is also just fine for me. So so that seems to be okay. And yeah, and so knight to e2 was the best response to my rook move. Instead he played a3, kind of encouraging me to play the move I wanted to play anyway. And so once again I'm significantly better here. Let's see, he played rook takes, and I took back, and now he played knight e2, so he's going to try and round up that pawn. But let's see, I was a little worried. Yeah, I checked this out. I was a little worried about queen g4 here. There's an interesting little tactic here I was missing. I can actually block with bishop g5, and if he plays h4, I can play f5. And I also could have played this way in the game. He can't win the bishop because his queen has to give up the pin. There's no safe squares here for the queen. So so that would be an okay way for me to play here. And I also managed to shut out his bishop this way. So that would have been okay. Let's see, he played knight e2. I went with e5. And then he went with queen g4. And I just ran away with my king, but once again, I could have played bishop g5. That still works. I can actually use my bishop to chase his queen away after he plays a move like h4. So I didn't have to be worried about that pin, but I was, and I played king h8. But this still keeps an advantage. Even with the strongest move, white can actually play knight takes f4 here, just to show some of the dangers in the position. If I take it, then he plays queen f5, and I'm not in time to stop this threat here. So after he takes it, I actually can't take the knight back. He could have just grabbed the pawn there, but I can play e4, shutting his bishop down, and I still have an advantage in this position. Anyway, he tried queen f5 immediately. I went with e4 to shut the diagonal down, and then he went bishop a6. And there's a tactic here I missed. In fact, I guess we both missed it, but you should be able to spot it now that I've given you the hint. Okay, pause the video here if you don't see it. I'm going to give the answer away now. Yeah, it's a very simple fork. Queen check. Picks up the bishop. So if we back up a move, after he played queen f5, and I went e4, the bishop has no safe square. These squares are covered, and that square is defended by the check and take bishop. So he's just losing a piece here. Anyway, he went bishop a6. I didn't take advantage of that. I had maybe more than one opportunity to play that tactic. But the way I played it also keeps a winning advantage for black as well. So I am winning through this part of the game, although it wasn't as convincing as it could have been. Anyway, I went for the queen trade here, and just to get rid of some of those dangers. And I have a winning endgame here with these passed pawns. Well, only one of them is passed, but it's a powerful duo of pawns in the center, one of which is passed, so a protected passed pawn. And I keep that winning edge for quite a few moves, so let's go through this part a little more quickly. It was a long game. And we'll step through this, push those pawns, trying to work them forward slowly. Didn't seem to make any mistakes on this part, but a mistake is coming up. So bishop f5, I'm kind of shuffling my pieces here a little bit, trying to force his bishop off this diagonal and off that diagonal so I can get my queen forward, my king forward to attack the f-pawn, which was a real hindrance. I thought if I could get my king forward, then I could easily promote these pawns. And the chess engine finds a much nicer plan. So say starting from this position, instead of trying to maneuver my king in there, try to bring my rook in here. I eventually hit on the idea of bringing my rook in, but this would have been a good opportunity and would have saved me some trouble later. So the line goes like this. It can't really stop me from playing bishop f4 now. He can drop back, and then I can bring my rook in like this and round up the pawn that way. And he can't actually defend it. So yeah, this was going to work out for me one way or another. But that would be the quickest way for me to get there. Let's see, I went bishop f5. He went king e2, and then I took. And actually, that turns out to be a mistake. So I'm winning up to this point, and after I take, white has a draw. So let's see, instead of that, I should have, yeah, I should have done the check, drive the king back, and put the rook on the g file, gone for a plan where the rook infiltrates. That was the way to win this. So let's see how white could draw this. Yeah, it still seems tricky for white, but taking is the right answer. I step forward with my king, and the thing he has to do is he has to activate his rook on the c file. This is not the only move. The rook could have gone to c4 or to c7 as well. Those would also be drawing lines, but this is one that seems pretty straightforward. He's going to pick up the d pawn here. I can't defend it. My king can't get back, and this is just a draw. So my big mistake was trading off the bishop and allowing this endgame where he can activate his rook and pick up one of my big center pawns there. So fortunately for me, he didn't take advantage of it. He defended with rook f1, and then once again I have a winning endgame, and I keep it this time, and I eventually hit the idea of maneuvering my rook around and activating it, and that is the winning idea. And let's see, we're here, step forward with my king, and yeah, it looks dangerous. He's going for counterplay over here, but I strike first, and then rook g6. Rook g6 wins. I was just looking at it. It seemed a little bit inefficient because I had to move it to g8 after a bit. But instead of rook g6, I could have pushed the f-pawn. This is the quickest win. Let his pawns come forward. And then, you know, I only bring the rook in at the last moment. Oh, let's see, king c4, attacking my pawn here. I can take. I can push, I can drop back. So I've got his pawn stopped and I'm queening. And so that is the most straightforward win here. Anyway, I played rook g6, so this made it a little bit exciting because after a while here I had to, it took me a little longer. I didn't push the f-pawn, so I had to take the h-pawn to clear this file. So my path was slower than it needed to be. And now he has the idea of, you know, shielding the rook and then pushing these pawns forward. So here I drop my rook back. So a pretty clever idea from white, but it just doesn't quite work because my I get to queen. Let's see. He took the rook. Yeah, he queened and I took it. He took back. Now I queen. He pushes the b pawn forward, and my queen gets in time to stop everything. So there's nothing really he can do here. And there's no draw. He's got there's no stalemate. I mean, he's got lots of moves there. So he resigned. Anyway, interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time. Bye.